Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in. Happy New Year, Roshni.
Happy 2023. Oh my gosh.
Welcome to the next year of our lives.
Oh my word. Are we out of the pandemic? Can we start the clock again?
That's debatable. I guess it depends who you talk to.
Oh my word.
I have not. I'm still living in it.
Oh my word. You know, it's funny. I was doing those, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard those things where people are like, instead of a resolution, they do like the one little word, or they do like the 23 for 23 or whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'll do one of those 23 for 23 lists. I think I got to about 10 and I'm like, I don't know what else to write about. Like, I don't know what other goals to have for the year.
I have a couple simple goals. I've got my writing goals kind of lined up pretty well. I'm working on getting through my screenwriter's Bible that I purchased with your gift for my birthday.
Aww. How big is the screenwriter's Bible? You've been reading that for months.
Well, I've also been editing your book. So.
Okay, oh, fair enough. Right. Continue on.
That takes a lot of time. Yeah, I mean, it's not something I need to set aside time to go through it more regularly. I kind of took during the holidays, I've kind of taken a break from it, but I'm got up to the part that's most important because I'm really focusing on dialogue, subtext, and characters. Those are like three of my weak points, and so I'm really focusing a lot on that. I've been doing a lot of watching a lot of stuff on YouTube, by other coaches and writers, trying to get really because I have a lot of scripts that I've written that I think the ideas are really good, but obviously I every time I go back and read them, I'm like, oh, who wrote this garbage? They really need work as far as developing the characters more, which will help the stories develop more, and then just better dialogue, better subtext, and really making them work better. I've got like these drafts that some of them have been rewritten many times, but they were kind of rewritten with the incomplete toolkit, I think, is what my problem was. So I really have been trying to bring my skills up to par, so that when I do go through and rewrite these 2 or 3 scripts that I wrote a long time ago, actually, I can take those really good ideas I had and really come out with something that's sellable, that's people will look at and say, yeah, this is worth a recommends kind of result on like a blacklist kind of thing. So that's kind of my goal for the year is really spending the time to really polish my skills so that I can polish my scripts.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that explains a lot, because so full disclosure, Tom's been editing book 3 in my Kingdom Legacy series, and one thing you were getting me on was you're like, not enough characterization, which I thought was hilarious because I'm usually the one who like does that more than plot. And so I was like, whoa, but you're reading that section in your toolkit, so that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes, I have the same problem. I look at my scripts and I'm like, a lot of times my characters exist to move the plot forward, not because they have a purpose of their own. It's like, I have to start thinking about, what do my characters need and want, and how does that work into the other characters' needs and wants, and the story that way. Because me, I'm very plot focused. I'm very structure focused. I know exactly what I want to happen in the film, but then I'm forcing my characters to do that instead of finding out what they want. So I think that's a big part of it. You're definitely much stronger at the whole characterization than I am. I don't know why this book seems like it. I was pickier on. Maybe it's because it's my 3rd book I've edited, and maybe I'm getting better at editing. I don't know.
Which is awesome. I mean, It's funny though. So this particular book, which is due out in April, I'm thinking there's going to be at least 7 books in the series, and I really feel like 1, 4, and 5 go together. And the whole point behind the books was that they're standalones and you can read them without having to have read everything else. But if you want to read the others, it just enriches it. So they're all set in the same world with different characters from different countries. But 1, 4, and 5 will have the strongest ties because 1 is Queen Jenica, and spoiler alert, 4 and 5 follow Rhys and Farah, which are her friends from book 1. they'll play bigger parts in the, next 2 books than books 2
Don't
and
tell me
3,
you're
so
doing
I
one of those two-parter stories, though. It's
No,
like
no, no, no,
no, okay.
they're not it's not a to be continued, but I think 2 and 3 were harder to write because it would've been a fallback for me to just be like, "I'll just keep writing more of Queen Jenica stories," but, like, because I picked other people to write about, I think that's
Mhm.
why it's harder. So and this yeah.
Yeah, I think the first 2 books were great because they were um, almost completely different, characters. You have some continuity between the books, which is nice. Even in book 3, there's some continuity. But you give your main characters their due, and then you use your existing characters supportively, in fun ways. So there's like it's kind of like fan service.
Mm.
So if you've read book 1 and then you read book 2, you'll be like happy with kind of the continuity. But you don't have to have read book 1 to enjoy book 2. Book 2 is a fantastic story all on its own.
Well, I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
do have to wonder, though, if it hurt me as far as, just readers recognizing and sales and stuff to do it the way I've done it.
Hmm.
So, I have a feeling once I release 4 and 5, people will be like, "Oh, okay." Because then they'll be like, "I get it. I get what she's trying to do." But I think
Yeah.
if you're going, like, just off like, if I stopped now and never released book 3, people will be like, "Eh?" Because it is just it feels disjointed because you're like, "This isn't the same people," until you start reading it. You're
Hmm.
like, "Oh, there they are in the background." But
Yeah. Do you have plans aside from your books? Are you working on any screenplay stuff?
not right now, to be well,
You're
okay.
mostly working in front of the camera these days.
Yeah, I was gonna say I am working on scripts, but not for my own. So I did take a job starting last year. I guess they haven't fired me, so I guess it's safe to talk about it. But
Otherwise, it's the most lengthy secret probation we've ever
right?
seen.
Yeah, I was like I didn't want to talk about it until I knew for sure like I was out of that probation period because like for the first month or so they were kind of like I wasn't sure how it would fit with my schedule because I do work a lot on camera and do a lot of voiceover and stuff. And so I wasn't sure if I would be able to balance time-wise everything. And so they were like, "Well, we'll see how it goes, and after a month or so we'll evaluate." And like 6 months later, I'm like, "Well, I'm still here, so I guess it's okay."
Yeah, I
But
forgot about that. Well, that's like almost a whole nother episode we should talk about
oh yeah, well, I'm a
because
staff
it's
writer.
comic
Surprise,
book
everybody.
related. Yeah.
Yep, I'm a staff writer for 2 comic book
Woo!
series. So that's if anything, script-wise, that's what I've been focusing on in addition to my own books and stuff. I haven't really been writing my own scripts, partly because well, first of all, I don't wanna write a fantasy script because that's a lot of I always write in the idea of, like, "Can I produce this?" Fantasy would be a lot of work, right?
Oh,
Because 'Cause
of
you've got all
course.
the
Yeah.
special effects and post and all that. So that's the other thing too, it's like, I don't wanna write something unless I know I for sure can produce it and put myself in it, since that's usually how I write in
Uh,
with me in mind as a character in there, so,
yeah,
I
I don't
haven't
have
been
that
writing.
problem. I just write whatever I want because I know I'm not going to make it usually, unless it's a short. If it's a short, then I do think
Yeah,
about production viability.
yeah, but you're writing to sell, I'm writing to, like, produce it, so it's a bit different.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also, to be honest, so, I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but there's been a lot of interesting trends in writing, and it not that you can't write to the trends, but it would be fascinating. So one thing a project I worked on recently, it was a whole I wanna say it was actually feature length, now that I think about it. I think it was longer than a pilot TV. It was because it was at least, like, 2 hours of footage, but they split it up so everything was like a TikTok video. So they shot everything was like a 5-minute episode, but if you watch it together, it's a full movie. So that was
Mm.
an interesting way of writing as well, because everything kinda ends on a cliffhanger, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
the 5 minutes that they want you to watch the next 5 minutes. So that's a new style of writing that's kind of coming out.
Watching that all at once would be kind of weird though. Like every 5 minutes would be like ta-da, and then it would solve itself right away.
Well, I mean, it's just sort of like it sort of bleeds it's so if you wrote the script and you chopped it up, but you just kinda tweak it just enough so at that 5-minute mark, there's just a little bit of a closure/cliffhanger, but then it goes into the next thing. So it's not like a, soap opera, "Dun, dun, dun," like, every 5 minutes, they do play off each other, and it's like, you're not watching it and the next, episode 2 is like 20 minutes
Yeah.
later. It's not like that. But it is definitely an interesting way of filming and writing it because it is so quick,
Mm.
you know? So that was one new style that I saw kind of emerge in the last year or so.
We saw that a
I
lot with well, we interviewed the people from the game. That was an example.
That was more web series though, the way they
Yeah.
wrote that. That's been around for a while. This was very specifically, I mean, um, the project I did, they shot it in vertical, like, it was specifically done for TikTok type stuff.
Ah,
So, it's very you think about not just the writing, because a TikTok reel is shorter than a web series for sure,
certainly.
you
Yeah.
know? So you're in a way, you're kind of getting right to the plot because you can't even, like you can't spend a ton of time on, long looks and,
Mhm.
you know, tons of characterization, you're just kinda getting right to the point. You also think everything's vertical, so how are we shooting that vertically?
Mm.
So it is different than a web series, for sure.
Right, absolutely, yeah, and obviously I don't know how you would re-edit it to do it as a widescreen presentation later. That'd be weird if you'd already done it for TikTok.
You can't because it's
Yeah,
already shot in vertical.
mhm,
Yeah. So that was interesting. Obviously, web series, I don't even know what broadcast is like, and we couldn't even find broadcast for New Year's. We were trying to find the ball drop. We're like,
yeah,
"Where do you find a broadcast channel?" We ended up watching it on YouTube. So who
yeah.
knows what's going on with broadcast these days?
Well, with TikTok, that's interesting 'cause, they've been going through a lot lately. You gotta wonder who's gonna stay with TikTok when, whole countries are starting to ban it, and, in the US, I think it's federal employees can't have it on their devices or something like that. And they're recommending that other people don't use it. I hope they work it out because I like TikTok. I like watching it. I mean, I don't think twice about what China's going to do with my information, to be honest. I think it's a great content platform. So, and I don't think Twitter has really you know risen to the level of TikTok on the video side. Even Facebook is a little light on. They have their shorts on YouTube, and then they have the video on Facebook. I don't think either of them have really accomplish what TikTok set out to do.
Well, it's kind of what they tell you in entertainment, right? Niche down.
Mm,
Right? If you're a thriller writer, don't start writing rom-coms until you've established yourself one way, because people get confused. It's kind of the same thing with social media, right? You
mhm.
TikTok, you're good at videos, don't start being Twitter. Twitter, you're good at the
Memes and
130 characters or whatever, don't start doing
yeah.
video. That's actually an interesting thought, though, our little segue, about content creation, where the money's coming from and the future of things. Right now, like you're saying with TikTok, and they're thinking of shutting it down or banning it in some places. And I think, didn't you just say off podcast something with Twitch uh
Twitch, yeah, back in
and
September, Twitch,
monetization?
they if you were like for the big content creators that make like over $100,000, they changed their payout. So instead of like over $100,000, TikTok's going to keep half. So up to there, it was only 30%. It's kind of like
You
the
mean
App
you
Store.
mean Twitch, not TikTok.
Twitch. I mean, I apologize.
Yeah.
Twitch, yes. Twitch, yeah. So if you make up to 100,000, Twitch keeps 30% of your revenue from like subs and gifts or whatever donations that you get in stream, and then over that, they changed it to they're taking 50%, and a lot
Mhm.
of those big TikTok creators or Twitch, geez, they all start with T. Why do they all have to start with T? Didn't we learn that like you're not supposed to name your characters with the same first letter in their script
Right?
because it's confusing? So yeah, so a lot of these big Twitch creators are a little annoyed with that. They Twitch kind of came out and said, "Well, that's okay. We're going to have all these other things for you to make money with and run lots of ads." They want Twitch creators to run more ads on their stream, which is probably the most disruptive thing you can do on a live stream is to run an ad. Because if I'm streaming and I'm talking about something, and then you see an ad pop up and block me out, you miss whatever I'm saying. So, and it's not like you can rewind it because it's live. They don't like that, and they feel like Twitch is, it's an Amazon company, so they know Amazon has lots of money. Although, Twitch is separate, needs to make its own money, but they feel like that was kind of it's this corporate, entity kind of thing versus the individual creator kind of thing. And we've seen it happen before, with monetization on YouTube channels, where you had to have so many views or hours played before you could monetize. It's typical of the industry.
Well, YouTube and Twitch run ads before you get into certain streams. I think it's the settings that the streamer has. But the interesting thing about all of this to me, so we've talked about this off podcast. A lot of these creators get their money not directly from the platform, but because of brand deals. TikTok, for example, you don't make money at all from your videos. It has nothing to do with your views. It's did you make a brand deal and now you're, getting money that way on TikTok. Twitch, yeah, I know they have I've heard some stuff about their affiliate program and here you are saying, that they're changing numbers. YouTube, I think it's based on views, but a lot of it is sponsorships, right? And again, the tip jar and stuff like that. And what's fascinating about it is during the pandemic, within the last year or so, SAG realized that they were excuse me, SAG realized they were leaving money on the table with content creators. Content creators have been around for like what, 10 plus years, and they're like, we're leaving money on the table. So they created a special category for people to join the union. I don't know much about it. I'm not in that category, but from what I know, it has nothing to do with your viewership or your numbers and everything to do with your brand deals. And if brand deals are kind of changing or going away, which is kind of the word on the street with content creation, I wonder how that will affect people who want to join the union, who are content creators, specifically in that category.
Yeah, I don't understand the SAG part of the equation either, since I'm not an actor. But obviously, there's the unions do get involved in a lot of ways with these kinds of projects. In fact, the Writers Guild is gearing up again for a potential strike. It feels like they just had a strike, but that really wasn't a strike. That was the whole battle with the agencies, was what
It
it
sort of
was.
fizzled because of the pandemic, and then nobody talked about it for a couple years. So,
Well, I think that, well, again, it wasn't a strike because it was not against the studios; it was against the agents.
yeah.
That's what that was, and it kind of petered out because the agents slowly, one by one, kind of made their own deals to kind of, you know, meet the requirements of the guild, of the Writers Guild.
See, I kind of felt like so, okay, let's go back in history in case people are like, "What are they talking about?" So there was a big to-do back in what, 2018, 2019, about agents basically becoming producers. Am I correct? Is this the thing I'm thinking about?
Agents becoming producers and then having a conflict of interest
Yes.
over, you know, producers obviously are their goal is to get the film made and keep it under budget, whereas an agent's job is to get their writer clients the best deal they can.
But not necessarily to produce the project. That's
Right.
not their thing.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's a conflict of interest there, and the writers felt that they weren't getting the service that they were promised by their agents, and two, that their agents were actually working against them in some cases.
So a lot of writers in a show of solidarity were asked to part ways with their agents, which a lot of represented WGA writers did. But then the pandemic happened, and I felt like that sort of called a weird truce on the whole thing. Because once the pandemic hit, like, they just sort of didn't really deal with it anymore.
Well,
It was gearing
it
up,
kind of it kind
but
of happened like under the radar. They had talks constantly going on. It became a kind of a one-to-one kind of thing where the WGA would talk to individual agencies. There's only a
mm.
few big agencies, and if they had enough big writers, fire their agents. There was enough pressure there, just in a limited sense, to bring them to the table. The Writers Guild didn't get everything they wanted, but they coordinated to make changes to how they do things to prevent there from being this conflict of interest for the most part. And it has to do with like the percentage of ownership in a production company or the role that they play in a production company, depending on who the writers are and stuff like that. They did manage to work it out, and then there was a period of time that the agencies negotiated to divest from various companies that they owned or had part ownership of, to make it work without making them, take a huge loss over the whole thing. In the end, the agencies kind of, I think, accepted the fact that, we're here primarily, first and foremost, for our clients, which are the writers.
Gosh, that was so under the radar then. I
Hmm.
seriously, like, once the pandemic hit, it just felt like they were just like, "Truce," to
Yeah,
me anyway, like, I
I
didn't
don't
hear
even
anything about
know.
it.
I don't even know, if all the agencies eventually did it or not. But it kind of felt like a domino effect. I can't remember. Like UTA was one of them, and I think they, once the big ones, started to say, okay, this is what we'll agree to, and they negotiated it. The other agencies kind of like fell in line and said, okay, we can live with that too.
Mm,
They're all
yeah,
playing on the same level at this point.
yeah.
But now, after all that happened, I can't believe it. It seems like we're right back at it again because the back in November, the WGA, um, the the one out west, West Coast agency, put together their negotiating team because it's time to go back to the table for the negotiations over the MBA and stuff like that, the minimum basic agreement, that kind of stuff. And it's a lot of the same issues that they've had before. Things like residuals for streaming. One of the new things that I thought was interesting was that there are a majority of writers that get above the minimum, which is, well, technically called scale, but the ceiling for those is kind of being pressured down. So while a majority are getting more than the minimum, they're not getting a lot more than the minimum. So there's like a pressure, even for the most successful writers, to to lower that. You have a minimum agreement because you want to make sure the people on the bottom aren't getting, you know, taken advantage of. So that's why you have a minimum. But that doesn't mean, really successful writers shouldn't be paid what they're worth. But then there's this pressure, um, to that's keeping that upper level down now. So they want to kind of address that.
Huh, interesting.
Hmm.
When are they supposed to start negotiations?
I don't exactly know when that's happening, but they're in the early process of getting started for that. The current contract expires in May,
Okay.
so they've
Yeah, because I
got
was
some
gonna say that was
months.
right before
Yeah.
the holiday, and then, like, it's been a quiet holiday here, let me tell you, so I'm like, they probably didn't do anything over Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year, you know?
There's an article in Deadline. I'll put the link in the notes that you can read if you want to check up on it. But a lot of this is typical negotiation stuff. You put your
Mhm.
committee together, and they come out with statements about what they want and how they're willing to fight. They think it's going to take a strike, but nobody really likes a strike. But you have to do it if you have to do it.
Gosh, I feel like a strike right now would just be a really bad idea. So one of the things that we were also gonna discuss is how they were saying it's a very light pilot year and there's just not a lot of content to put out
Hmm.
on streaming and on, in theaters and on broadcasts and stuff. And I think it's just because I mean, okay, I think there's a couple things. Partly, maybe there's just not enough stuff that's written or purchased. Maybe there's not a lot of money floating around to buy said projects. And also, at least to the best of my knowledge, we're still in Hollywood, we're still operating like there is a pandemic if you're doing a union project.
Hmm.
And that kind of puts a damper on things as well. Non-union has basically non-union was a free for all. So during the height of the pandemic, non-union, like 90% of non-union was following COVID protocols. Some people would fudge it. Some people would do half the protocol. Some people, whatever. But once the mandates were lifted in LA, where they're like, you don't really have to wear a mask, blah blah blah. They're like, cool, to the races. And non-union, to the best of my knowledge, operates the same way it did before. People will call you the day before and say, "Hey, can you come to set?" Like the whole shebang, because you don't have to test, you don't have to whatever. I used to see on the breakdowns where they're like, "Are you vaccinated? Are you boosted?" Put it in the notes. They don't even ask for that on breakdown anymore.
Mm.
So they're just operating like pandemic, whatever, it's done. But from what I understand, union still operates like there is, they still want you to get tested, they still want you to get boosted, stuff like that. So that definitely slows things down for sure. And of course,
Yeah.
budgetary concerns.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, just the big picture stuff is like the Warner Brothers and the Disney, layoffs and cuts and things.
mhm,
There's kind of a retraction in the budgets. These billions and billions of dollars the streamers have been spending, especially with competition and subscriber loss on some of the platforms, or not growing as much as they wanted to. And again, it comes back to things like shareholders and
mhm.
stock prices and stuff that they want to the investors only want to see a positive side of things, and if they're not, they're going to have to make changes. And I think Disney stock was down something like 40% this year, 45%.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have to look at, you can't just have a spending free for all. So the amount of content, it's going to be a quality over quantity kind of thing, hopefully. But then again, you're probably not going to see as many, Lord of the Rings prequel shows where the budgets are hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's going to be it's like a shakedown we're having a shakeout we're having right now, where we're going to have to see where things wind up with these CEO changes, these C-level changes in the
Mhm.
companies, to see where they're going to put their efforts and in their production. Netflix has spent tons of money over the years, and it hasn't helped their numbers, obviously. But now we're all the ad revenue versions are basically out now. So Disney Plus and Netflix and HBO all have their ad supported
Mhm.
levels. So we'll have to see over the next few months what happens with those new plans, whether they start to rebound on their subscriber numbers and their revenue, so that they can afford and justify spending the money on the content.
And we're right back to regular TV with ads.
Isn't it weird? Yeah, one of the strongest streamers right now is Amazon's Freevee, which is their free streaming ad supported streaming service. It's like what
Mhm.
Pluto TV is doing, and Tubi are doing really well, because they're traditional free advertising supported streaming networks.
Mhm.
And things like Pluto TV, it's a lot of syndication too, so that's dirt cheap these days in some fashions, for some of the older catalog stuff.
I'd be curious because I know, for example, in Europe, they pay a TV tax, and I'd be curious if we had gone to that model. Like, I wonder if they're having issues with content, basically.
In Europe or England or
Yeah, in Europe, because you pay the TV tax. If you don't want TV, you just don't pay the tax, but then you don't get
oh
any of that stuff. But I just wonder, like, if they're having content issues as well. I mean, obviously, they also have apps and stuff like we do, but they're not as because with our broadcast, you don't pay for it. So you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not as reliant. They have built-in
mm,
funding.
well, it's much, yeah, that'd be a whole interesting subject to talk about European
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about a lot of other international markets is that their content generation locally is much more than it used to be. I mean, the amounts of shows coming out of countries like Germany and
Mhm.
Romania and Australia, and the Asian markets obviously have been huge with the Korean dramas and stuff like that. China, um, it used to be America made most of the TV shows and then syndicated them around the world, but that's not happening anymore. Now there's a lot more demand for locally produced content. And it's interesting because we don't have, as English first writers, we don't really have any access to those markets, as
Yeah.
writers. They're going to, and I see a lot of posts for writers that are like, well, Canada. They're always looking for native Canadian writers for their shows, because they get money from the government to make shows. I think it's the same as with England, with the BBC.
Mhm.
So they want to use their own writers. Obviously, if you're in foreign language markets, not English, it's hard for us to write something for you know uh, Italian show, which is culturally as well as language
I was
wise.
gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah, the culture thing too. But, I mean, I don't know. I wonder. I'm not saying I want America to start paying a TV tax, but, just having that built-in funding might make a difference, you know?
Hmm. Well,
But, I mean,
yeah.
as far as, like, Disney stock being down and Netflix and all that, it's like, what did you guys expect? We've been locked up for 2, 3 years. Now we're finally able to get out. Yeah, you're gonna see I think the pendulum's gonna swing, give it, like, 2 or 3 years more time when people kind of get back into their normal routine, and they still wanna come home and watch a TV show after work and all that stuff,
Mhm.
but just give it that pendulum swing, you know, to
Yeah.
kind of even out. Of course, the stock's gonna go down right now.
I'm wondering where the, uh cord cutting, the cable television subscriptions, where that pendulum swing is for that. Like, is there going to be a plateau about there's always
Mm.
gonna be, like, a certain level of people that are gonna still pay for, cable TV versus, the rest of us who are going, like, streamers, but we're still paying for all of it just in a different way, it seems now.
You know where I think that line is, and I see this because of my mother. I bet you once a certain generation dies out, that's when cable goes.
Attrition kind of thing is what you're saying.
Yeah, because think about it, like, for example, landlines have gone pretty
Mhm.
much, but who uses landlines? The last
My
part
mother,
of this
my
the last
82-year-old
yeah, the
mother.
last part of, like, the senior generation, so, like, maybe 60 plus. And that might even be generous, maybe more like 70 plus. But, like, a certain group, millennials and younger, we don't use landlines, you know?
Mhm.
So I think it's the same thing. I see my mom, she's got the apps, like, she has Netflix and Disney Plus and stuff like that, but she still goes to cable. She still loves, like, Hallmark Channel, you know, she'll watch the news on cable, stuff like that, because she knows how to use it.
Mhm.
It's harder to get her to use, like, Netflix and stuff. So I have a feeling certain things like, I know everyone's trying to like, "Hey, you go use the apps, go use this, go use that." Give it time. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
generational thing.
I'm really curious of, like, used to call it appointment television, where, oh, Thursdays at, 8 o'clock, you got to watch Friends or whatever it was.
Oh, okay.
That I don't, how many live TV in general, it's like the percentage of people who watch a show live, even if you have cable TV, you can still watch on demand. You can watch it the next day or whenever after it's out. I wonder, we're getting to the point where it's so customized to our schedules, we control it, not the network anymore. I mean, the time gating has kind of come back a little bit, where like not Netflix so much, but Disney Plus
I was gonna
and
say, Disney's still doing that with,
the
like,
weekly
all the
episodes.
like,
Yeah.
Mandalorian and all that stuff. HBO too, a little bit, right? Weren't they doing
Hmm.
that with, the Game of Thrones stuff?
Yeah. So that weekly episode time gating thing is still a thing, but you don't have to. Only if you want to see it right when it comes out does that matter. But, like, I'm so far behind on, like, Walking Dead. I could watch 2 seasons in a row without stopping. I wouldn't have to, like, you know, because I'm just behind. And there's so much
Mhm.
content now. It's we were talking about this, or my family was over last night, about how we watch things, and it's a matter of, I binge watch, but I binge watch not all at once, but,
Mm.
like, I'll watch one show, an episode, a day or two every couple days until I get through that season. Then I'll switch to another show, and so I'm watching like one show at a time, but sequentially, sort of, versus binge watching. Like, oh, they dropped a season of something, I'm gonna watch it right away.
But you know what it is. Again, you're not the audience. If you were a 9 to 5er, you would watch it when it drops because then you have water cooler talk. You're a freelancer.
True.
Who are you talking about it with? Do you see my point?
You. Just you.
But yeah, and I'm a freelancer too. So that's my point. Like those things, the time dropping things,
Hmm.
that's why just the same thing we just talked about the cable, that's for a certain generation. The time gating thing is also for a certain type of person. If
Hmm.
you're like going to work and you guys are like, grabbing your coffee in the kitchen, you're like, "Hey, did you catch blah 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 last night?" Oh my gosh, like you're going to watch when it drops because you want to talk about it with your coworkers.
Right.
But we don't it doesn't apply to us in that respect.
Yeah.
I would be curious, like, so your family members that do watch it on time, are they going into an office?
uh yes. Yeah. Yes.
My unscientific survey right
You know what I'm
here.
saying? Yeah, well, half and half, I guess.
Yeah.
So, like, my mother and I, we watch, stuff on Hulu. We're actually been going through old shows,
Mm.
as we when we have dinner. We watch. We've been kind of binge watching X Files and Star Trek and stuff. We're doing it that way, versus, I guess, my mother doesn't really care to get invested in new shows anymore. But I watch newer shows, but I'm just so backlogged on it. Like I said, I pick one at a time. But I don't have anybody to talk to them about then. So
But,
I'm
you know, that's
alone.
that's funny too that you're saying, like, your mom watches old stuff because, like, I'm the same way, and I think, like, I don't know, gosh, we need to just do episodes on, like, generational and cultural, like, mindset because
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
yeah, because I wonder, you know, for example, like, I know for example, they say your music tastes stop after, like, 20. So, like, you're more likely to love what you grew up with than wanna listen to new stuff. Like, it's just kind of, like,
Mm,
a
yeah.
thing about people, like, because your musical tastes were forming when you were younger. And I kind of wonder if it's the same thing with TV, like, I rarely want to get invested in a TV series unless I've heard a lot of good reviews, because that's my time. Even
Mhm,
books, like, I don't really wanna start a series because that's a big so I'll usually read something I've read before. I think I've discovered, like, maybe 2 or 3 new authors in the last couple years that I like, and I'll buy their books, but it took a lot for me to try a new author.
mhm,
I would rather just read an author I like and wait for their new stuff because it's an investment, and when you get older, you just don't have that kind of time,
mhm.
right? You would
Yeah.
rather invest in what you already like. I don't know.
No, yeah, I'm exactly the way. That's why the things like the Disneys and the Netflixes keep churning out prequels and sequels and stuff exactly because we're
Mhm.
comfortable with it, and we've invested time in it already. We know the characters. It's like any book series actually. I used to read Star Trek novels. It's like you could pick one up, you know all the characters except for the main characters, so you can just dive right in. You don't have to like
Mhm.
do a lot of world building in your mind because you already understand the world. So it's kind of like that. The same reason I think AMC's got two more spin-offs of The Walking Dead they're going to launch next year. So yeah, we're going to get more of that.
Oh, speaking of AMC, now you might know more about this because I haven't really stepped foot in a theater in a while, but I believe even though theaters reopened, Cinemark and AMC and a lot of the theaters are having some trouble right now, aren't they?
I don't know what the current numbers are, but it can't be good.
For some reason, I thought one of them nearly declared bankruptcy. Cinemark, for some reason.
They've been
I could be
close.
wrong.
They've all had like new investors that have kind of shored them up.
Okay.
I was disappointed because just a month ago, the independent theater near me, like 7 minutes away, announced that they were closing.
Oh,
It's
wow.
part of a local, like, Cleveland area chain of indie theaters, kind of art
Mhm.
house theaters. This was kinda more mainstream, actually. It was a relatively modern theater. I think it has 9 screens or 10 screens. So it's not a small theater, but they're closing it down, and, I'll have to go 15 minutes away to the AMC in the next town over, kind of, if I wanna see a movie in a theater. So that's kinda sad.
And speaking of movies, Moviepass made a comeback.
Did they? I think
Oh,
we
you didn't
talked about.
hear?
I did. Yeah, I didn't. Did they actually launch? I remember they were sending out emails to former subscribers, kind of wanting you to get on the wait list to rejoin it. But I don't know what happened with that.
So I am going to look it up right now because I remembered hearing about it and I was kind of like, I got so burned because I even bought stock in it. That was a stupid
Ooh,
move.
you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
dumb. And so I got so burned on it. I was late to the party because I remembered hearing other people talk about it, and I think I finally bought my movie pass maybe a good 6 to 9, maybe up to a year after everybody else had purchased it, and then it went out, and this I also lost stock on it, and I was just and then, of course, like, Regal, AMC, and all those people came up with their own subscription passes and
Yeah.
stuff. So I was like,
A-list.
"Oh, yeah, like, Movie Pass is dead, it's not gonna come back," and then they did make a comeback, and I'm like, "I don't know if I should trust it." You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I haven't bought it again because I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. Would you buy it again?
I don't know. I don't think so. I I I mean as long as I have an AMC theater close to me, I'd probably go back to A-list if I was going to be going to the movies a lot. But I'm still shy about going into theaters too frequently to I have to really want to go see a movie to go to the theater.
Mhm. So it came back out in the fall, and it has a tiered pricing now. So
Yeah,
before I think it was like what, 9.99 for the whole
it depends how
month or
many
whatever.
movies it was. I thought it was.
No, it was a flat rate. It
Oh, it's
because I remember that's the
Moviepass. That's right.
Pass. Yeah,
It
the
was
reason I
cheaper
bought
than
it was 'cause it was
A-List,
so
right?
freaking cheap, yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's, anywhere from 10 to 30 a month, and let's see what else it says here. I think this is why I didn't get it, and again, we'll put something in the show notes about it, or you guys can do your own research, but I believe the reason I didn't think it was worth it this time is before, remember, it was basically any theater. I think now it's only certain, like, for us, it would be, like, Lemley, like, the art house theaters, but I don't think it includes places like Regal or AMC that already have a subscription service.
Mm.
So it's like, for me, what's the point? I wanna go anywhere I wanna go, right?
Mhm.
I think that's why I didn't buy it, but
Okay.
yeah. But double check. Double check what's in your area. But yeah, I don't know, and because I got so burned, ugh, you'd really have to sell me on it and tell me you're not going out of business again.
Well, that's one to watch this year. We'll have to see what happens with
Yeah.
that. It's going to be an interesting year. It's kind of like, here we are thinking we're coming out of the pandemic, then there's more happening in China. It's kind of been an up and down ride. It's been really rough for a lot of companies. So we'll see what happens this year.
What are you guys looking forward to in 2023? Let us know in the comments. You can find us online at writersgrouptherapy.com or at WGTherapy on Instagram and Twitter. And have a wonderful 2023. We will talk to you guys soon.